Welcome everyone. My name is Prem. Thank you for joining us today for this exclusive 45 minutes webinar on fortifying your Microsoft 365 environment. Are you confident that your Microsoft setup is secure? If you have doubts, well, you're at the right place. Today we'll uncover the biggest security blind spots in Microsoft 365 and show you how regular assessments can proactively detect threats before they strike, eliminate misconfiguration that leaves you exposed, ensure compliance with GDPR, HIPAA, and industry standards, saves you from costly breaches and downtime, strengthen your business reputation with clients and regulators. Our goal is to provide you with actionable insights and a simple roadmap to enhance your security posture. So let's begin. All right, I want to take a moment to introduce your host for today, Creospark. We are a team of Canada and US-based Microsoft 365 implementation experts, passionate about helping our clients achieve their ideal employee experience. We create and support great employee experience with Microsoft 365 Digital Workspace. Our headquarters are based in Davis, California, and Toronto, Canada. We have three main solution areas. Modern work. The purpose is to make sure your organization can work from anywhere on any devices exactly the way you want. On process transformation is to help organizations of any sizes to go digital at their own pace, transferring some repetitive tasks to AI. On secure cloud, making sure your security, compliance, identity, and device management are solid because cloud should be as safe as it is smart. Our focus is on leveraging Microsoft technologies like Microsoft 365, Power Platform, and Azure to deliver this for our clients. All right, for housekeeping, feel free to add your questions in the chat during the webinar. Handouts and certificate for attendance will be sent out to your email after today's webinar session. You'll also receive a recording and recap vlog this week. Also, we'll also be sending out a certification of attendance for this webinar. Awesome. So, all right, I'm excited to introduce our speaker for today, Colin. Colin leads our security cloud and modern work practice here at Creospark. He's also Microsoft MVP alumni, which also basically means he recognized for doing some pretty amazing things in Microsoft space. He has helped countless teams make sense of complex tech turn into real world impact. And honestly, there's no other better person to guide us through what's next. Colin, I'll let you share more about your journey and what's on your mind today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Prem. So I'm Colin Smith. Thank you for attending. As the slide says, I've been doing this for a long time, over 30 years, worked with all levels of government and private sector. And I really have a background in both enterprise IT and security. I've got some security designations as well. It's a moving target. And like you said, the fun fact, there's nothing funny about cybersecurity. It's pretty serious business. So in order to keep my life in balance, I do some stand-up comedy after hours, just so I don't go crazy. If you're in the Toronto area, I've got a show tomorrow night, and you can check me out at cueballcomedy.com. All right, let's move on. So what are we going to be focusing on today? Really quickly, the agenda. Let's talk about regular security assessments in M365. IT security and cloud security are huge spaces, and it can be overwhelming. So what I'm going to try to do today is really focus on M365. So if you're a smaller organization and most of your IT infrastructure is based in Microsoft Cloud Services, this is for you. If you're a larger organization that segments your security and really you're on the team that focuses on things like Teams or SharePoint or email and OneDrive, this is for you. Can't cover it all in the 1 hour we have, so we're going to try to pick some things that are going to be important for you and give you some real takeaways. So we'll have some best practices, some overviews of some tools, some industry standards that are important to understand when you're communicating with your peers and the rest of your organization. And then what do we see happening in the world of IT security? And then something actionable that you can actually do today at the end of this session. So before we start, we're going to run a poll. Prem, you're going to drop the poll into the chat. All right.
It's on right now.
All right. So you guys can fill out the poll, put in your responses. Let's see how other people are doing in there. Okay. All right. So a lot of people are interested in keeping up with emerging threats and trends. All right. Well, this is definitely the session for you then. Give it, what, another 30 seconds, 20 seconds? All right. I think we'll move on. You guys can keep voting if you want, but I'm going to move on to the next slide. So start with a quote. And this, I love this quote. You know why I love this quote? Because unlike most quotes you see in decks, they're quoting someone famous, or they're quoting themselves, or they got it from a periodical there. This quote came from Copilot. And we don't know we can't find the attribution. I'm not sure if Copilot came up with it on its own or not, but it's a great quote. For a lot of organizations, M365 is their primary compute platform. And that's where their data is. It's in SharePoint, it's in email, it's in OneDrive, it's in Teams. And if they're not securing it, that is their corporate data at risk. And we always talk about the weakest link in the chain is how you measure the strength of that chain. Well, we need to talk about the weak links in your digital workspace, and we're going to focus on that. So what's the objective today? We're going to talk about the importance of security assessments. A lot of the organizations I deal with do not do regular security assessments when we first encounter them, and we try to change that culture and try to put it on their radar. And I'll tell you why that's important. Some best practices. And as part of the best practices, I'll tell you about the approach that we use at Creospark, and maybe you can adopt some of our techniques into your own approach. And we'll talk about one of the bundled best practices that comes with M365 and Entra ID, which is the Microsoft Secure Score. And at the end, I'll give you a list of things that you could start doing today to improve your security posture. I'm not going to dive too deeply into the suite of Microsoft 365 security tools. There's a lot of them. We've done other webinars on some of them. We'll probably be doing another one on Purview at some point. What I'm going to really focus on today is Entra ID and M365 specifically. We have other presentations that we've done that do deeper dives into some of the other tools, and there'll be more coming up as we continue to explore the Microsoft security landscape. But if you have questions about any of these, we can definitely answer those at the end as well. So why do we care about regular security assessments, and especially in M365? Because people ask, I've bought a service from Microsoft. I expect they're taking care of it for me, right? They're the vendor. They need to take all the security precautions, and I'm just the consumer here, and I need to feel secure. Well, that's true to an extent, but you have to remember that M365 is a generic platform used by millions of organizations around the world that have different security requirements. Some of them are legislated, some of them are regulatory, and you need to make sure that you're meeting your security compliance requirements. There's all sorts of standards. If you're with the Canadian federal government, there's things like ITSG 33. If you're in healthcare, there's HIPAA, there's FedRAMP, there's Sarbanes-Oxley, payment card industry. There's all kinds of standards that different organizations must adhere to. So you have to make sure that you're taking the steps and implementing the controls that are right for you. Some organizations have cybersecurity insurance. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And they have specific requirements as well. But at the end of the day, security is about reducing risk and being able to respond should something negative happen. just because you've taken the right precautions doesn't mean that you're never going to have a breach. So what do we want to do? Again, we want to identify issues early before they lead to a breach. So if we can plug some holes in our security, that's important. We can be proactive, right? That way, prevention is the key. And if there are holes that you're aware of that you're unable to plug for some particular reason, that's a technical term, plugging holes, by the way, you want to be able to communicate that to your organization and understand where your risks are and maybe have a plan around it. And as a business, it's really important to preserve your reputation. If your customers don't trust you, you could lose business. You may have some legal obligations as well around data that you're a custodian of. And a loss of data or a loss of access to data and systems could prevent you from transacting your regular business. And so it's important to be able to have continuity in the business and have a plan to continue that, but also to safeguard the things that have been entrusted to you. All right, so let's talk about some best practices. I'm going to start with the Creospark approach and then drill a little deeper down. So when we do a security assessment for one of our clients, or we work with a client to harden their environment, we usually start with CIS and NIST best practices. And we'll talk more about those on some of the next slides. What we really like to do is then add their specific industry requirements. And beyond that, talk about their business specifically. For instance, some of the guidance is to not allow logins from foreign countries. Well, if you're the Canadian military, you may need to have some of your human resources, maybe some of your soldiers, et cetera, outside of Canada for a period of time. So those kinds of policies may not necessarily work in your business. So it depends on how you conduct business and whether it makes sense with those policies. So let's figure out some business-specific controls, both positive and negative. So things to restrict access and protect data, as well as to open things up and make it a little less restrictive based on business requirements, but still understand the risks and manage those. Then we like to review the control sets that we're proposing and align those with business priorities, because there may be something happening that we need to know about in the business, a change happening, or things like acquisitions, et cetera. And let's make sure we align with those so we don't disrupt those and we can enhance those. So that creates what we call a custom benchmark based on those things. We'll implement the benchmark. It's usually a series of projects. Some of the things are more disruptive than others and changes the way people work. So we need to do some change management, and that's why it's a series of projects. We'll have to track progress and then update that benchmark at least annually, and preferably more often, because it's less work to do it more frequently. And we like to put in automation to track many of these things. That's, in a nutshell, that's our approach. I gave you a 2-minute spiel on that. If this is useful to you, please feel free to adopt it and use it in your own environments. We like to look at things in 2 ways, from the outside in and the inside out. And as I go through the rest of this presentation, I'm going to be talking about some of these things, right? So from the inside, and for the scope of this presentation, we're talking about M365 specifically, but Microsoft Cloud in general. And so that's really at the core of it. So you need to really harden your tenant and harden your M365 environment. And then as you get further and further out, I'll talk about each of these in more detail. It comes down to humans are the ones that are accessing it. And so how do we start from the inside, work our way out, and from the outside and work our way in? So keep that in mind as we move forward. So I mentioned the CIS and NIST benchmarks and guidelines. These can be confusing for people because they're similar, yet they're different. So how I like to think about it is NIST is the what. What do you need to do generically, right? And the CIS benchmarks is the how. How do you actually achieve that? So if you're talking to a business leader, maybe a CFO or some other, or a CEO, you'll use some of those NIST words and guidelines because they'll talk to you about the what and potentially the why. And when you're talking to folks in IT and IT security, you can talk about the how using the CIS benchmarks. But at the end of the day, they try to achieve the same things. They just look at it through a different lens. And then when we marry that with the Microsoft guidance, which is very specific to Microsoft cloud environments, you'll see how it all comes together. But why is it important to start with these? Well, first off, they're structured and they're well known. Most of the regulatory compliance standards, at least in North America, come from these. They adopt it and then they hone it and tune it to the specific regulatory compliance framework that matters to that organization, whether it's payment card or health insurance, or health information, etc. They're customizable. You don't have to use them all. It's not just turning one switch. They're a series of guidelines and controls. And they're based on continuous improvement, understanding that you can't necessarily implement it all at once, but once you get to a certain point, you can start exploring further enhancements. Okay, so let's give you an example. What I've got here is the NIST cybersecurity framework, the version 2.0, one of their guidelines, and it's around access permissions, entitlements, and authorization. So that's not necessarily language that we use generally in IT, right? It can be, but this is more generic business language. They talk about some principles, but it doesn't tell you how to implement that. If you take a look at a CIS control that I've mapped to this, right? One of the controls they have is multi-factor authentication. And we've talked about that in previous sessions. I'll talk about it a little bit more today. The idea being, this is an actionable way to achieve this, right? And if you look at the settings within M365 and Entra, there's actually a setting to turn on multi-factor authentication for all users. So by turning this setting on, actually, let me go to my laser. Use that a bit more. But by turning on the multi-factor authentication, you will achieve these, but it's not readily obvious to everyone. So you can, if you're talking to your CFO and he's in the NIST world, you tell him we've done this to enable this. You're talking to your CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer, and he's asking about how you align with the CIS controls. You can have that discussion. And there are dozens and dozens of these. When we do these things, we typically look at about 90 plus controls. I just wanted to give you one example. All right. Let's have a look at Microsoft Secure Score. This is something that's in the box in Microsoft cloud environments. If you've got a Microsoft tenant of any sort, you've got access to Secure Score, and it's based on what you have enabled. Okay, and it's the first place I tell people to look. Microsoft will give you a score based on their best practices. Now, of course, it's based on industry standards. It gives you some actionable recommendations, but what really matters is context, right? You can't always lock everything down because it may impede the way you do business. But the nice thing is you've got a score and you can improve it over time with actionable results. If you've not looked at it before, I highly recommend you look at it as soon as you can. Here's an example of a drill down in the Microsoft Secure Score into the recommended actions, right? What you can do here is take a look at some of the controls. If you turn on this control here, block persistence through WMI event subscription, your Secure Score will go up by about 0.8%, and that will improve your score. It also tells you what products it's in and what category it's in. And remember, we talked about some of these categories when we talked about our outside in and inside out. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Okay, so how does Secure Score improve security posture? Well, the nice thing is you can use it right away and it's systematic, right? You'll get overall security enhancements. And as you move forward, you will reduce risk over time. But we talked about identity. Now, identity and access management, that was in our outside in, inside out. In the cloud world, right, where people can work, remember we talked about modern work, people working securely from anywhere they like on any device. So what is the control? In the olden days, if you had a turnstile at your office, that was one of the controls as to who got into the building. You had a security guard, people would swipe in, and they'd be on your physical network, possibly with an Ethernet cable. So you really could use location as one of your control planes and access to that location. I remember one of my first jobs in a data center. Once you were in the data center, you had a lot of free access to things, right? That was it was just the perimeter that was secured for the most part, right? I could touch hard drives and tapes and things like that if I had to. In the cloud world, where people are working from all over the place, identity is really that control plane. So that's where it all starts. Who is accessing our system and how do we validate who they are? Right? We did a previous presentation on passwordless authentication. Prim, can you drop that into the chat, please? Hey, and Zillan and Prem, I'm seeing your cursors as well. I'm glad you're following along. So if you're interested in passwordless, which by the way, if anybody's using Google Consumer Services or Microsoft Consumer Services like Hotmail or Gmail, by the end of the year, you're going to be passwordless. They're pushing you that way. It's definitely the way to go. It is much more secure, no matter what people think intuitively. MFA, multi-factor authentication, which means more than one factor. So it could be something you know and something you have. For most people, it's a password plus something else. And then RBAC, risk-based access control. Not going to jump into that too deeply. It's a very complex topic, but we'll do another session on that as well. And actually, we talk about RBAC in two ways, as risk-based access control as well as role-based access control. So when I talk about conditional access, that's the risk-based. So conditional access policies, affectionately referred to as CAPs, that is something that goes beyond just a password or MFA. And once you've met the challenges you're in, it's very dynamic. So as an example of a simple conditional access policy, we know who the user is, right? So that can be done through all sorts of methods. It could be biometric, it could be user ID and password. There's lots of ways to identify a user, right? It could be a swipe card. Oftentimes we can look at a device. Is this a managed device that's trusted? It's managed with Intune, or I know that this is the device that you use regularly. Because I'm able to track that. And location, are you, first off, within geographic borders that I care about? Are you on a network that I know of? Are you at Starbucks or are you at the headquarters? I can detect all of those, and based on weighted averages and other conditions, I can say, hey, you know what? I know who it is. I trust the user. I trust this device. But guess what? They're in North Korea right now, and that's not something that I'm going to permit. So they may not be able to access certain files. Maybe they can get our public catalog, or our public price list, but I'm not going to let them get access to more sensitive data. And I can make that dynamic as to what they can access based on some of those things. And there's a lot more conditions that you can build into your conditional access policies, right? So if you are using conditional access policies, just be aware that once, and you're using MFA, once you've met that first challenge, which is usually a user ID and password today, but may not be, that's when the CAP is evaluated, right? and then you might get a second factor. But if you fail the conditional access policies, you may not be permitted. You may not even get that second challenge. I'm a big fan of conditional access policies, but over time they can get complex as you layer them. So it's important to test them and have a strategy for managing them. They maybe not apply the same policies universally to everyone. If you've got executives who travel, you might want to be more strict with them because they typically have access to more sensitive data. But if you've got salespeople that travel, you might want to then limit it to specific geographic boundaries that that individual is responsible for selling into, and still give them access to the things they need to do their job. So managing user access and permissions. Again, that's part of that identity and access management. But we need to review user permissions as well. Do people have access that they no longer need? Do they have more access than they need to begin with? And we need to adjust that over time. It's important to have reviews of identity and access. Some of the tools that we rely on and we encourage our partners and our clients to use are privileged identity management and privileged access management. So privileged identity management, or PIM, is a great way to have elevated privileges for a specific period of time. You know, we never want administrators to use their admin account for their day-to-day work, but even then, we might want to put more controls around it, have them go to a portal and check out specific privileges so they get added to their account for a specific task that they need to do. So maybe they'll get elevated privileges on a specific site or a specific device for a specific task, and it gets documented in the audit log as to why they requested it. And they have a small period of time. They say, hey, it's going to take me an hour to do this, and they have the elevated privileges for that period of time, and then they expire. And privileged access management is a little bit more global in that it's really focused on monitoring the access, who's been accessing what, and preventing it and monitoring it. So beyond just the giving the specific user access, it's managing and monitoring what's going on across the environment. Not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've had update cycles for devices for decades. Most of us have a way of managing them and making sure devices are up to date. Just want to reinforce that endpoint devices are and humans are the most exploited vectors into an M365 environment. So if you're not managing them, keeping them up to date, and keeping them hardened, you're exposing your M365 environment. The thing is, a lot of people have a great update strategy for their Windows devices, but they may have other devices that are not managed as tightly, and people definitely access M365 from mobile phones and other devices such as Android devices and Mac devices, right? So and tablets. And so it might be important. We're seeing more and more exploits in the Mac OS, iOS, and Android world. It might be important to have some policies and controls around that. I mentioned endpoints and humans. Those are the most vulnerable pieces of the layers that we're talking about. It's really important to train your employees and users of the environment. They're really your first, both the first line of defense, but also oftentimes the weakest link in that chain, right? We're seeing a lot of social engineering attacks. So what we do is simulated attacks as well as online training for our employees, and we recommend that for our clients. We also do that for some of our clients. We really want to create that culture of security where people are, I don't want to say distrustful, but they're aware and they take precautions. They don't necessarily respond to an email or a text message without thinking about what could be happening behind the scenes. We have mandatory phishing courses and simulated attacks. And if you want to talk to us more about that, we're happy to talk to you about that. There's lots of other organizations that do this. You can do this yourself. You can, if that's something you want to do. And Microsoft has some tools to help you as well. So I'm going to stop here and maybe have another quick poll about cyber insurance. More and more organizations have cyber insurance. Do you guys have it? Are you looking into it? Don't know? Looks like most of you don't have it. Let's talk a little about it. The main reason I wanted to bring it up here is to make you aware that it's available. A lot of our clients do have it. But more importantly, you need to review your policy. You know, if you're a homeowner and you have a homeowner's policy, for instance, you may have to have a roof that is less than a certain age, or else they won't cover you for certain risks. It's important to read the policy and understand it. And you know, there are lots of organizations that can help you with that. But the other piece that's really important is to make sure you're complying with some of the controls that they require you to have in place. And some of them, first off, they require you to have things like MFA for in many cases, and be compliant with specific standards. But the other thing is they may require that you have a third party validate that you've met the compliance. If you've ever dealt with insurance companies, you know, it's in their interest not to pay out claims. So they often will do whatever they can to find that you've not met your obligations under the policy, so they don't have to pay you out. All right, let's continue. One of the things that people were interested in was the emerging trends and threats in cybersecurity, especially around the M365 space. So let's have a look at that really quickly. First off, stolen credentials. You hear about it all the time. You might even get emails from an organization that you work with or have an account with that they've had a breach and your credentials may have been stolen and you need to take precautions. Ransomware, it's on the rise. It's increasing. Supply chain attacks, not only are organizations being targeted, but some of their partners and third parties are being targeted as well. Again, human error is still one of the biggest reasons that breaches happen. In the last 2 to 3 months, we've seen a lot of phishing and ransomware attacks. We've helped organizations recover from those and take precautions to avoid it in the future. Biggest trend that we're seeing right now, though, is AI-powered attacks, right? There are attack kits that you could basically phishing for hire, or phishing as a service, or ransomware as a service, and other AI-powered phishing attacks that can really data mine and get all sorts of information about the target. So it really sounds like they know who you are and know all about you, so that it is someone that you've transacted with before. So we're seeing more and more of that, and it's going to get harder and harder for humans to be aware that they're being phished, because it seems so real. Definitely something to include in your anti-phishing training. Okay, we're winding down now. We're past the halfway mark. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that you can do right away. First thing, as always, look at your Microsoft Secure Score. I often get asked, what's a good Secure Score? And again, it's all contextual. What I like to say is, take a look at the Secure Score, look at what the recommendations are, and identify controls that you can put in place right away with minimal disruption to how you work currently. And you could probably, for most people, if you haven't already done this, you can probably go up 10 to 15 points in your secure score. A lot of organizations have a policy of trying to maintain 80%. And again, it's a moving target because Microsoft updates it all the time. So that's a nice target to have and something to strive towards, but pick the one that makes sense for you. Okay? Create your own custom security benchmark. And that involves things like, hey, we have additional controls we need because we're dealing with something sensitive that's not part of any other regulatory compliance standard, or implement another regulatory compliance standard that makes sense for you because you work in that industry, whether it's nuclear or whether it's health or payment card, financial services, all sorts of them. Create an incident response plan and focus on the risks that you know you cannot deal with through a control. Either you've consciously chosen not to implement that control, or you're in the process of implementing it and you're not complete yet. Also focus on the most sensitive data and systems in your environment. And what would you do if those were breached somehow? Consider having a third-party assessment. Again, like I said, some cyber insurance policies require that, but it's always nice to have another set of eyes, right? You're already using M365. Learn about what Microsoft does on your behalf. They do a lot of things. There's a lot of telemetry available to you. There's a lot of tooling available, and there's a lot of controls and monitoring that's already in place that you can take advantage of. But in many cases, you have to turn it on. If you don't turn it on, you won't get that benefit. Okay, so take a look. We've provided some links. Understand what you have access to. Also understand what Microsoft doesn't do for you. What are the things that are your responsibility? And if you do experience a breach, follow the process for your jurisdiction. If you're in Canada, report it to CIS. If you're in the United States, report it to the FBI. We provided the links there. Also report it to your Cyberinsurance as required. Help to track the breaches and help others to avoid it by providing the information from your breach. It's anonymous in many cases, so look into that. I'm just winding down. I'm going to go to some of my last slides here, and then we can get into questions. So, big themes for today. Regular security assessments. They're important. Security is not set it and forget it. There are new attack vectors all the time. There are new vulnerabilities discovered all the time. And there are new tools that are being added by Microsoft all the time. So it's a moving target. Stay on top of it. Come up with a cadence that makes sense for you at least once a year, more often if that's possible. Start with best practices. We presented some for you. Look at the Microsoft best practices, look at the best practices for your industry or any compliance requirements that you have. And then create your own custom benchmark that makes sense for your organization and align it with your business and your industry, and create a response plan and mitigations that help to maintain your business critical systems and data. All right. I've got some appendices, but we're going to move into the Q&A. Prim, do you want to take over the screen?
Yeah, I'll take it over. Just give me 1 second. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. I think it's loading.
All right. So shall we start with questions? Do we have any in the chat that we want to address first? Okay. Were there any in there? There's a lot of chat. Anything? Yeah. So there's a question by James about ransomware support. So if you do get, if you are attacked and do end up with a ransomware attack, Microsoft they do have some support for that in M365. I provided a link for that, but the assumption there is that all of your data is in M365, and the recovery plan for that depends on having specific controls turned on, right? It's very possible for OneDrive or SharePoint files to become encrypted, and if you don't have a backup of that, either through Microsoft or a third party, or yourself, then it could be a little bit more challenging to recover from that. But Microsoft does have some tooling to help with that. Any other questions?
We don't have any on Q&A panel, I think.
Okay, I realized today was a bit of a whirlwind. We tried to focus on things specific to M365 without getting too deep. There's a lot of depth in all of those areas we covered, and there's many other areas that you can look at. Security is an end-to-end thing, and we just looked at one element today. We will be having another webinar next month, and we're going to be looking really at the anatomy of a breach. What are some of the breaches that we've dealt with and helped organizations recover from? What happened there? What happened? What did they not do? What did they do? How were they exposed? What vulnerabilities were exploited? And then how did we recover? All right, I think it's time to wrap it up, Prim.
Awesome, sweet. All right. Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Your feedback is valuable to us as it helps us improve our webinar and create quality content for you all. To access the survey, simply scan the QR code on the screen. Your participation is directly contributed to the quality of our webinars, and you'll also have a chance to win $50 Amazon gift card.
Oh, wait, there's a question there from Ruel. So, so PIM is actually available. Nuno, please put it in the chat. I believe you need the AAD P1 for PIM. Is that correct? Or is it available with the basic Entra ID? I believe you need P1 for PIM. PAM is more of a concept, less a service that you can implement across systems. So that includes all kinds of monitoring, things like Sentinel and other monitoring tools. Yeah, premium P2, not P1. So yes, if you want to use PIM. And that's a great service because even if somebody has your admin credentials, they don't have the elevated access. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colin. Thank
Thanks.
you, everyone. Awesome. We'll see you for the next webinar.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.